Today, again, we're looking at the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac
Hold on, what?
all over 2a. And the way we use that is it allows us to solve for our x values of any quadratic that we're working with. So this is one method that we can solve for any quadratic. Again, that's based off of our x squared plus bx plus c formula equals 0. So that's our standard form, where our a is our leading coefficient, our b is our coefficient attached to x, and c is our constant. So we can use that and plug it into this, and we can solve for our x-intercepts, zeros, or roots every time.
That seems confusing.
Seems confusing, seems bad. Really, it's not too bad. Again, this allows us to solve for our x-intercepts every single time. So once you guys learn it, get used to it, it'll always work. So let's look at a problem and put it into practice. So number one, we've got
X squared plus 2x minus 63.
okay. So in this case, our a value, again, is our leading coefficient. It's in front of our x squared. It's 1. Our b value is 2. And our c value is negative 63. So keep the sign that it's attached with. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take these values and we're going to plug them into our formula. So we have negative b, so negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 2 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 63. All of that divided by 2 times our a, which again is what?
Hold on, let me write all that down real quick.
Okay, so again, the first thing we want to do whenever we're solving using quadratic formula,
Wait, so you just plug it in basically?
just plug it in. So put it in standard form, figure out what your a, b, and c are, plug them in, and then the next thing is we want to simplify this. So we need to simplify it as much as we can. Can't do anything with the negative 2. Plus minus just stays there. Let's figure out what's on the inside of our square root. 2 squared gives us 4. And we're going to have a negative 4 times a 1 times a negative 63. So we can use our calculator again to help us do that. So we have negative 4 times 1 times a negative 63. And we get 252. So plus 252. All of that divided by 2 times 1, or 2. So we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of
256.
256. All that divided by 2. And the square root of 256 is what? 16. Now here's where, again, we can think about what we were doing on Wednesday. Quadratics can have 2 solutions, 1 solution, or no solutions. In this case, we get our 2 solutions from this plus and minus. So we're going to have negative 2 plus 16 divided by 2, and we're going to have negative 2 minus 16 divided by 2. We want to simplify these two. So negative 2 plus 16
Is
14 divided by 2. So we get 7. And negative 2 minus 16, they're both negative, so then comes negative 18 divided by 2.
that's negative 9.
We get negative 9. So x equals 7 -9. Again, we can put them in that set notation. Those little curly brackets.
And then it got two solutions.
We got two solutions, right? We have 7 and -9.
Oh wait, do we have to write two solutions, or can we just do it like that?
We can just put our solutions in this case. Because again, we are solving for these.
You know, Joe, give me a headache.
So let's do a few more. Okay.
Yes. It's too much, no.
Let's do number 2.
Okay. So 6x squared minus 11x minus 10 equals 0. So a will equal 6, b will equal -11, and c will equal -10. And you gotta plug it into the formula.
Plug it in.
So it'd be negative times -11 plus or minus the square root of -11 squared minus 4 times 6 times -10 over 2 times 6.
Perfect.
Quick, bro.
I gotta write that down.
So that's it. And then we start simplifying. Okay. So we have a negative times a -11. This is a positive 11. Plus or minus the square root. -11 squared is 121. -4 times 6 gets you -24 times -10 gets you a positive 240. And then 2 times 6 gets us 12. Combine on the inside, so we have 11 plus or minus the square root of 361. So then what is the square root of 361? We get 19. So we have 11 plus 19 divided by 12. 11 minus 19 divided by 12. So 11 plus 19, 30 divided by 12. And that reduces down to, we can divide both of those by 6. So that's going to get me 5 halves.
And it would be
11 minus 19 gets us -8 divided by 12. What does that reduce down to?
wouldn't the whole answer be
2.
2 and 5?
Not 2 and 5. 5 halves. We can't simplify that 5 halves.
-2/3.
We'll just keep it as a fraction. And yeah, we can divide both of those by 4. So we have -2/3. So there's our 2 solutions.
Well, the alternative one would be 2, 5, right?
Oh, we could have 2.5. Is that what you
No,
mean?
like 2, 5, the alternative.
So yeah, we got 5 halves and -2/3. Now, what happens if we're missing a value?
Make it equal to 0.
We're going to make it equal to 0. All right, so if we look at something like number 5,
I'm trying to still copy it now.
Man, but I'm just washing the sauce. I mean, it looks simple. It's just a lot of steps. And
Yeah,
you might get
it's just
overwhelmed.
plugging it in.
it's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, aside from all the steps, it's pretty easy because all you gotta do is plug it in. You just get lost in the sauce.
You get lost in the sauce, that's right.
So again, kind of the hardest part is getting all our information plugged in, and then just one step at a time. Step your way through it. Don't try to do too much at once.
That's crazy because my little sister needed help with long division last night. This kind of reminded me of long division.
They're lifelong division.
Hey, what about like on number 4 where it equals like another problem? Do we just subtract it over or something?
Yeah, we would move that over to this side.
So you would minus 4x and then add the 15.
Mhm.
So it'd be negative 2x squared minus x plus 15 equals 0.
Yes.
And then you do everything else.
Then you get everything else. Just like this problem, right? We have a 24 on the right side of the equation. We need to move it over. So we're going to subtract 24. That leaves us with 9x squared minus 25 equals 0. And then again, our a value is our leading coefficient. So a equals 9. Our b value
It's 0.
is 0, right? We don't have any x. And then our c value,
25 negative.
negative 25. And we're going to plug that in. So negative b, our b again is 0.
And then it'll be square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 25 over 2 times 9.
There you go.
9 times 4.
Oh, yes.
What is 9 times 4? 30? No.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, is it 36?
Mhm.
40? 42? It's 42? What's 9 times 4?
Use your fingers. 36.
That's what you were right.
Oh, God, I get confused.
And then 36 times 25,
I get confused.
900. So again, the zeros, you don't really have to worry about them. So I just dropped that first one. All that multiplied together gives us a positive 900 divided by 2 times 9 or 18. Square root of 900, I believe, is 30. It is. So we have plus or minus 30 divided by 18. So what does that reduce down to? Again, we can divide both of those by 6.
5 and 3.
5 and 3. So we get a plus 5/3, and we also have a negative 5/3, right? Because we have that plus or minus. So our solution, we have a positive 5/3 and a negative 5/3. So we still have those two answers. They're just opposites of each other because we're not adding or subtracting anything in front of it.
Is that a negative 2 over 3 on the last problem, or is the whole
Wait.
thing negative?
You just sent
Negative
this
2 over
It's
3.
negative 2 over 3.
But then this whole thing here.
That one's a positive 5/3.
So you
Yes.
would just simplify the fraction.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, all we can do there is simplify the fraction. That plus or minus is telling us we have both a positive and a negative solution.
X
See,
equals.
I've seen plus minus on my calculator. I never knew what it was for.
Which means, yeah, we have both a positive and negative solution.
This is the one.
You're telling me, bro. I don't understand this.
Let's
Um,
do. Oh,
Can we,
I thought we were gonna do
I'm on the
like
right.
12.
number 5?
Huh?
Can we do number 6?
Number 6.
8x squared equals 10x.
When you just move it over, then you put C to 0.
Yeah. So it's almost the same as.
So number 6,
Yeah.
You just move it over and put C to 0.
yes.
So it'd be x squared minus 10x.
Bro, like she, I don't know, bro. It's like, she's a different breed.
I thought Katie was retarded.
I already said I thought Katie was retarded.
It's terrible.
And then, yeah, our A is 8
B is negative 10, and C is 0.
and C is 0.
And you just plug it all in.
And then plug it all in. Again, negative 10 plus or minus square root of negative 10 squared.
Minus 4 times 8 times 0, which in reality those become 0.
That's right.
And then negative 10 squared is 100. So it's really just the square root of 100, right?
No.
Yep, so that's exactly right. We have the 0 times the 8 and the negative 4. Of course, that just cancels that entire part out. We have negative 10 squared gets us 100,
So negative 100 divided by 2 times 8
and
That's
then
16
square root of 100
is
10.
is 10. Just takes us right back to 10. So we have 10 plus or minus 10
over 16.
over 16. So 10 plus 10
20.
gives us 20. Divided by 16, what does that reduce down to? 5/4. And then we have 10 minus 10,
That's 0 over
which gives you
16.
0 over 16, which is equal to
0.
0. So x equals
5/4.
5/4 and
0. Almost said that. With the squiggly lines, gotta do the squiggly lines.
oh yeah, and the
Or
squiggles.
else it's wrong.
Can't forget.
Can't forget.
There we go.
Is this all we're doing for today?
This is all we're doing. We're just doing the quadratic formula.
Praise Allah.
However, let's look at a couple more.
Praise Allah.
Yeah, I almost lost some faith, bro.
Let's look
All the
at.
rest of you are just moving it on. Moving it over.
That makes me
Yeah.
angry. That makes me
Let's look at number 8.
No, what we have.
That makes me sad.
Is it our homework?
So the homework no's on that other packet.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's a maze.
Sort of.
You're really trying to give me a headache.
I think what's starting on mine.
Okay.
He's already
But there's still a couple things that we haven't seen with our quadratic formula. So let's look at number 11 for sure. So we haven't done one like this yet. We have negative 3x squared.
Plus 8x minus 7 equals 0.
Okay, so again, our a value
Is negative
3.
And C is negative 7.
And so when we plug that in, negative b plus or minus square root of
A squared minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 7 over 2 times negative 3.
guys, keep down. All right. And so when we plug this one in and start simplifying,
6, 12 times 7. That'd be negative 24 is the next one. Alright, 4 times 3 is 12, 12 times 7 is 24, that'd be negative.
12 times 7,
7 times 2 is 14, 84.
84. And it's negative 84
And then over negative 6.
over negative 6. Now here's where the reason why I wanted to do this one. 64 minus 84 leaves us with negative 20. What happens when we have a negative under the square root?
You can't square it up.
So it's
We can, but what'd you just say? There's no real solution, but we do have an imaginary solution. So remember that negative under the square root, we can simplify it by pulling out that negative 1. We can also reduce this 20 as well. We want to split it into the biggest perfect square possible. That is a factor of 20, which would be 4 times 5. So I'm splitting this negative 20 into a negative 1, square root of 4, and the square root of 5. Well, the square root of a negative 1 is I. Square root of 4 is 2. And square root of 5 is just square root of 5. Can't do anything with that.
What's that letter there for?
The I means it's an imaginary solution.
Wait.
So it is a non-real solution. Now I'm still not quite done. I can simplify this one more time because I have positive or even, and an even number. I can divide each of these by 2. So that's going to get me 4, so negative 4. And actually I could get rid of the negative as
That'd be
well.
negative, that'd be a 3.
Plus or minus I square root of 5 over 3.
Wait, when you do something with the
So I
six-
divide by the negative as well.
Oh, you did do something with the 6 over 5. I see. I said 3, I didn't see that down to that.
So here would be our solution to that problem. We can't reduce it any further than that. I divided everything by that -2. Of course, that doesn't really change the sign because we have that positive and negative answer anyway. Okay?
Let me write that down real fast.
So anytime you get a negative underneath the radical, remember it just becomes an imaginary answer. And anytime you get a number that's not a perfect square underneath the radical, you want to simplify it by taking out the biggest perfect square possible and having a non-perfect square left underneath
Can I
the
do this
radical.
work on a separate sheet of paper?
And so, yeah, you're going to have to do that homework